Great to see everyone. I'm Carl Lejwe. I'm the Provost, and it is really an honor. This is actually my first Provost lecture series event, and particularly tonight, it is really so foundational in terms of when we think about the educational experience that we want to create here at Stony Brook, taking our ability to focus on access and the way we think about equity and inclusivity and build it with excellence, build it with world-changing research, with an educational experience that pushes boundaries. We are truly a unicorn in that way as a university. And to have a speaker tonight who's going to be able to kind of thread that needle and bring that real-world experience and talk about what it means to dream big, to have self-confidence, to do things you didn't know that you could do. This is all about who we are trying to be as Stony Brook, and I'm just really thrilled that in our first event that I get to do as Provost, that we have a speaker who embodies that so deeply. But let me just say a few things about the lecture series. It's really unique in that we have a wide range of presentations in this series, from scientific research to cutting edge work within the humanities to opportunities to really merge kind of real world sensibilities and opportunities with the academic and learning experience. Tonight's event specifically is part of the Entrepreneur's Edge program in the College of Business. Launched in 2014, the event has provided a forum for Stony Brook to present stories of highly successful entrepreneurs to our students, alumni, and friends of the university. Now under the direction of Professor Richard Chan, Director of the Entrepreneurship Program in the College of Business, the presentations provide a unique, behind-the-scenes look at what it's like to build a successful business. And let's be frank, if you don't know, you don't know. And having that access, having that information to be able to peek behind that curtain with someone who's gone through it, not just the good times, because I think what's so hard about being an entrepreneur, being someone who sometimes has to move fast and break things and take risks, is we don't always talk about the failures that happen along the way. What does that mean? Do you see that as part of the pathway to success, like many entrepreneurs do? Or do you see it as a sign that something's wrong with you? You can't do it. You're an imposter. Until you really kind of hear from entrepreneurs and all that goes into that success, it's hard to understand how to make sense of your journey. So, especially for our students, I really hope that you hear that tonight, that you really hear the nuance of what it means to be a successful entrepreneur as you think about what your potential opportunities as an entrepreneur are. So the talk tonight by Rob Basso this evening is the 6th Entrepreneur's Edge program. Previous speakers include CEO Richard Gelfond of IMAX, Stanley Bergman of Henry Schein and Son, Eddie, founder of Miracle Corners of the World, Eugene Aletto of Bedgear, Dawn Zier of Nutrisystem, and Pablo Legarreta of Royalty Pharma. So we've had some great folks, and tonight is another example of that. Rob's an investor, a coach, a mentor, and he's going to lead us through an interactive entrepreneurial discussion. He's a seasoned entrepreneur and an author of the business book, The Everyday Entrepreneur, and How to Apply the Triple Threat of Ambition, Confidence, and Conviction. During his talk, he'll share his personal story, highlight effective approaches for taking calculated risks, and discuss how to become an effective leader and communicator. He'll also explain how to identify and take advantage of business opportunities. It's a great crowd here tonight, and I look forward to the discussion. And with that, I'd like to turn it to Dean London, who'll introduce Professor Chan. And let me just say one thing real quick about Dean London. I know I should have said it before you started to come up, but he is such an important part of this school of business, or College of Business, excuse me. He is a dean who is a leader, who is a mentor, who leads by example, whose ethics and North Star are just as much as his commitment to excellence and pedagogy. He is someone that I have come to truly admire. We are going to miss him terribly when he steps away. I keep trying to talk him out of it, but he isn't buying it. But he has just been so instrumental, and just before we start, I just want to do a round of applause for Dean Lowe.
Was that in the notes I gave you, Carl? I think. I'm just joking. No, I'm going to be brief. Thank you all for coming. Thank you to the students, to our entrepreneurs, to people from the business world, to our staff, and thanks to Marie Bacallion and Jenny Forrest Gloucester and Amy Milligan and everyone who helped with this event. So we're looking forward to hearing what Rob has to say, so I don't want to take up the time. Richard was... There he is. Okay, maybe Richard just wants to say a few words. Richard is the director of the entrepreneurship area within the College of Business.
So College of Business have experienced a tremendous growth in the past 10 years. So with great responsibilities, with great power comes great responsibility. I always want to use that line. But one of our mission as a college is to foster and promote contribute to the economic development of Long Island. So our centers, such as Center of Entrepreneur Finance and Innovation Centers, have really created platform that allows students to collaborate with faculties and business owners to solve real-life problems. And furthermore, we have frequently collaborated with many stakeholders, many institutions across campus, such as Guest Institute, Genesis Center, CWIT, and Center of Technology, Biotech. And so it's not surprising that our graduate program have been recognized as the top 50 entrepreneurship program by Princeton Review and by Entrepreneur magazine for the past 2 years. And from my understanding, it's likely will be ranked again this year. So, but it's mainly because people like you who are actively involved with us, with our college and with our university. But so that's why I'm really excited to introduce our special guest tonight, Mr. Rob Basso. I met Rob last year in one of the social event last year. It was one of the first social events since pandemic, and I learned about his entrepreneurial experience, and also he's a Long Island native. So it's wonderful to have him to share his entrepreneurial experience. He has a long list of accomplishments, so please allow me to use my cheat sheet to highlight some of his accomplishments. So he's a serial entrepreneur and author of the business book, The Everyday Entrepreneur. Apply the triple threat of ambition, confidence, and conviction. He worked his way up in business from salesman to successful CEO. He has built and sold several payroll and HR business to public companies and have been involved in a number of multi-million-dollar deals. He has appeared over 100 times on national cable news network, including Fox News, Fox Business, MSNBC, and CNBC. Over the past 10 years, Rob has been the CEO of his own business, worked with partners, launched business, and most recently experienced being a C-suite executive for public companies. He's an engaging and dynamic speaker, and he will provide interactive, inspiring and strategy-rich program for our audience. So without further ado, thank you, Yvette. Thank you, Rob.
Thank you, Richard. Well, thanks everybody for coming tonight. I want to thank the university, the provost office, as well as the president. I hear it was a big day here at Stony Brook. She gave her a state of the university. Unfortunately, I didn't get a chance to see it. I heard there was lots of events going around. I'd like to start off by getting everybody to come up. We got to energy set this room. So everybody stand up if you don't mind. Okay. Don't worry, no calisthenics, no jumping jacks. If you didn't know, humans carry energy and electricity in their body. approximately 100 watts per human. So I'm going to round up, because I'm doing math quick in my head, and say there's about 200 of us here. Okay, so that's 20,000 watts of power. So what I'd like you to do is reach out to the closest human being that you have and touch the person next to you, touch the person in front of you. Okay, I know it's post-COVID, guys, I promise. Okay, we are creating the biggest battery that this university has ever seen. In fact, 20,000 watts ends up being 20 kilowatts, which runs the average household on a daily basis. We only need it for 1 hour. So what I'm asking from you is to set your intention for the next hour. My intention is to tell you my story, ask questions, and get you to leave here with more information than when you sat down. Get the energy up. Think about what you want to talk about. Think of the things that you want to ask me. More importantly, this is not classroom. Use your phone. Text your friends the things that you like you're talking about. Take pictures, post things, video. This is what this new community and this new world is about. Social's not going away, and I think that if we use the power of this room, we can help more people live their life of success. I'm living mine right now. I hope by the end of this talk, you'll get the opportunity to learn the things that you might need to do to be successful in this world today. Okay, thanks for the human battery. Great job. You guys did a wonderful job. I can feel it. I can feel it from here. So, I think that the most important thing that you guys know about me is my background. And I'll try not to kill you from that I was born in X year, but it is important to know where I came from, to know where I've gone, because I guarantee you a bunch of people in this room have very similar stories. So my parents got divorced when I was about 8 or 9 years old. I grew up in a little place that you see on the screen behind me. Now, that wasn't our whole house. We lived in half of that house. So the right side of the screen is the house that we lived in. So after my parents got divorced, we ended up moving to Vermont and New Hampshire for a year. My brothers did not handle the divorce very well. They got into drugs. They got into all kinds of horrible things that you'd imagine. And what I did was I tried to do the opposite of what my older brothers did. Not to say I was a saint, I have to tell you. I was constantly in trouble in school. I had literally in my senior year, I got class clown and most energetic. Are you surprised? So I was in the principal's office all through junior high. My mom would constantly run in, have to leave work and defend me, even though there was probably no real legitimate reason to defend me. I probably did whatever it is that they say. I have wicked ADHD, probably wasn't diagnosed at the time, definitely wasn't on any medication, and I figured out a way, coping mechanisms to make the world work for me. At a young age, when you're not in control of anything, it didn't work so well. So that's part of the reason I was constantly in trouble. I had so many jobs when I started out. Probably starting when I was 13, maybe I was 12 years old. I was 12 years old, I had my first paper route. Now, most of the young people in this room don't really understand what a paper route is, because you probably didn't get a chance to do it because they don't let kids do that kind of stuff anymore. Now it would be considered child labor probably. There'd probably be some rule or law. But I would get up at 5:30 or 6 in the morning every single morning and deliver the Philadelphia Inquirer. I lived right outside of Philadelphia in South Jersey. So while all my friends were sleeping, I'd be up on my little Huffy bike with the bag in the front, driving over people's lawns, probably making their porch 30 to 40% of the time. Later on, when I had more money, I ended up getting a moped, so I did the whole thing in like 15 minutes. I'd be driving up on people's lawns. I could literally picture them looking out the window, this crazy kid on a motorcycle driving by delivering the papers. But that was only one of the jobs. I made jewelry in some strange man's basement. I know that sounds really creepy, but the simple fact of the matter was he was an artist. He lived in my neighborhood, and I made these weird little silver things, and I'm like, what am I doing? But he paid me cash. It was great. I worked at a pizza place when I was in high school. I learned how to make pizza. I was 15, 16 years old, and I begged them to let me run the pizza oven. I used to be washing the dishes. I literally, to this day, can't believe they let me do it. I still have a scar on the top of my hand from where I burnt myself on the pizza oven. That was only a few of the jobs. I washed cars, and I dried cars at the local car wash, and I was the only English-speaking person at the car wash. It was weird. And I tell you, I had the opportunity to meet and mingle and learn about what it was like to have a job, to be employed, to have a responsibility, even when you didn't like it. Who here has a job right now, out of the students, I don't want to call the adult, the rest of the crew out, that has a part-time job that they absolutely hate, that they do not like in one way, shape, or form? Every single one of you has a part-time job that you absolutely love. I've been in many rooms, I have never seen that happen. Literally. So what do you think that you can learn from having these part-time jobs when you're younger? How do you think it will impact your life when you get older? I'd like to ask the crowd some examples. We have a mic we can bring out to you, but you might not need one if you want to stand up and tell me what a part-time job means to you. Because it's not just a job. It's a lot more than that. Anybody? Yes? Oh, lifeline to my future freedom. It's like he had that prepared. I swear he's not a plant. I'm not even sure how to react to that because it's probably one of the best answers I've ever heard. What is your name? Anthony. Anthony is going to be a rock star, I have a feeling. Anthony, what is your field of study? I know it's business, but what specifically? Marketing. Aha. Okay. So that gets us into a really good story. So Deli Dreams. So when I was graduating college, and much to the chagrin of probably some of the professors here, I was not a business major. I was a history education major. I literally could picture myself with the patches on my shoulder. I was going to be a social studies teacher. I was going to teach high school social studies. I did my student teaching at Malvern High School, okay? And I had a great experience. Mr. Zaccaro was my student teacher. He basically left the room and let me run the entire classroom. Again, probably not legit or legal, but I got a ton of experience working with young people. I decided it wasn't for me. I couldn't find a full-time teaching job, so I was working in a deli in an office building. Every single day, all these business people would come in, all dressed nice, looking like they're going to their fancy jobs, and I had just graduated with no money working in this deli. I wasn't embarrassed because I was working in a deli. I was embarrassed because I had spent 4 years in college and I couldn't find a job. So I decided to wrap my resume in all of the sandwiches. I can still picture them today pushing the mustard aside like, what in the world is this? I got 5 job offers. 5, not 1, not 2, I got 5. And I got an opportunity with each one of these organizations. For those of you that might be more my age in the room, a company called Vitra Healthcare, which is no longer in business. It was Choice Care over in Melville. The woman was so nice. She said, Rob, you interviewed really well. We really want you to take our job. Don't take the other ones. Well, I said no to everybody else. I took that job. 2 weeks before I was supposed to start that job, she comes downstairs and says, ugh, we had budget cuts. Sorry, dude. You know, we can't hire you. And I'm like, I said no to all these people. She's like, sorry. And I was like, well, what am I going to do? Back in the deli, working in the deli again, making sandwiches. The resume trick only works once. I couldn't keep doing it. So at the end of the day, she felt so bad. A week later, she said, my husband runs a payroll service company, and he'd like to interview you. I have no idea what that is. I got paid cash my entire life, and maybe I got a check when I was 16 or 17, maybe working at one of the catering halls that I worked at. I'm like, fine, I'll interview. I ended up taking the job, and then not even 18 months later was their top salesperson out of their 32 offices, and I was underpaid and underappreciated. Who was the young gentleman that I was talking with earlier tonight? Awad? Am I saying your name correctly? How do you pronounce your name? Jawad, excuse me, Jawad. We were talking about this, and what came out of his mouth was, he left his big employer and he moved on to an entrepreneurial venture. And I said, why? And he says, I was underpaid and wasn't appreciated. Those are 2 huge motivating factors as young professionals where I did not want to start my career knowing that I was already low person on the totem pole. Not that I didn't want to pay my dues. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying if I was the absolute best at my job in that entire company and I was paid less, got worse territories, why would I want to do that? So I made a decision to just quit. I quit without a job. And my dad calls me. I call him up and he's like, Rob, what are you going to do? I said, I did really well this last year. I got like 5 or 6 months worth of savings. I don't know what I'm going to do. He's like, you got to know my dad. He's a steady Eddie kind of guy. He's a nuclear engineer by trade, does power generation, worked for big companies his whole life, super smart, but he had jobs. This is what he did. He had these long-term jobs for 10, 15, 20 years at a clip. And so he didn't understand this idea of, forget it, I'm just going to quit. Now, that might be something that you guys are used to because in the crowd, there's probably no Gen Xers. Maybe the few of my friends and associates here, they're Gen Xers. But millennials and Gen Zs, if they don't like what's going on, they're gone. They're on to the next thing. And I don't really have a problem with that because unfortunately, you get taken advantage of in this world. And I felt that I was being taken advantage of at a very young age. So what was I going to do? So I had a pretty good reputation in the industry. And one of the people that knew me really well is this guy named Dave McAllister. And he knew me because he worked for a competitor and I was constantly stealing their clients. He freaking hated me because I was in there stealing everything every week. My name was probably discussed in their sales department more than some of their own sales reps. So what ended up happening was he came to me and said, hey, we want an open office in this region and we want you to run it. And I said, okay. I was 22, 23 at the time. And he says, we never offer anybody your age this position. And that didn't really mean much to me. I was like, okay, well, that's kind of cool. I thought it was great. But 3 or 4 days later, I called him back. I said, nah, I don't want to do that. I want to own my own business. I want to own this office. And he laughed. He's like, that's nice, Rob. There's no way that's going to happen, you know. And then after 3 or 4 months of negotiating back and forth, I ended up making the deal of a lifetime, which changed my life. And that deal was, I convinced the president of that company to let me work for the business for 6 months. If I hit certain goals, he would allow me to buy that business back from him at a predetermined price. I didn't have any money to buy it, so that was a whole other issue. But I didn't worry about that at the time. I was just more worried about what kind of deal I can get. I'd figure out how to get the money later. And it went back and forth for 3 or 4 more months, and eventually he relented, and they made the goals absurd. Like, there was no way I was going to do this, and they knew it. They absolutely knew. This kid will just be working for us, it'll be fine. Nope, that's not exactly what happened. So I hit the goals, and they had to sell me by contract the entire business that I had built over the last year. So not only was I paid from somebody else, I already had a client base when I stepped into my business. But then there's one big problem. I didn't have any money. I mean, I had a couple bucks in the bank, but not enough to actually buy the business. And it's not like they were going to float me a loan. They're like, no, you owe X amount of dollars. Now, it's not going to sound like a lot of money to you at the time, but it was enough. It was about $85,000, okay? I didn't have $85,000. And I talked to my dad. And my dad said, I'll loan you 10 grand, but I can't give you or loan you $85,000. So I gladly let him lend me the $10,000 with interest. I paid him 10% interest. Come to think of it, it's kind of loan sharky of him to charge me 10% interest. But listen, he's the man of modest means, and it was a big deal. So, but he trusted in me that I was going to be able to pay him back. I needed $75,000 more. So what am I going to do? So, what do you think I did? How do you think I went out and about and figured out how to get that other $75,000 bucks, Mr. Smarty Pants down here? I raised capital. Well, how would you go about doing that? So what would you do at 23 years old, some of your ages in this room right now? How would you go about finding $75,000? What would you do? With my business card in it? Yeah. Oh, okay. Yes, sir. Family and friends. Okay, logical place to go. Family and friends. Where else would you go? Crowdfund, yeah, didn't exist when I was doing this, but yes, you could absolutely do that. It's huge now, and I've noticed some of these fantastic companies that come out of crowdfunding, and a lot of these websites are out there really turn into something. The majority don't, but that's a good idea. What else? Back here? Sorry? You could go to the SBA, but probably in my stage and your ages, no SBA lender will probably lend you the money because the way the SBA works, it's through a local bank, and you have to be financeable, and you have to have assets. But it is a good thought if you have assets. Did you knock on doors? Pretty darn close. So I swear, I didn't put him here on purpose. So yes, I literally knocked on doors. So what ended up happening was I sold somebody payroll services 2 years before. And I remember distinctly meeting this guy. He was probably 20 to 25 years older than me. I knock on his doors, this unassuming little place in Long Beach, New York, and it says Mar-a-Lago Security on the front. It literally, the place was like falling, the sign was crooked. I'm like, I go in, I knock on the door. The receptionist, whose job it is to not let you in to see the decision maker, wouldn't let me in. And as I was about to leave, I turned around and I said, "Are you sure?" She goes, "You're just trying to sell me something." I said, "No, I'm not trying to sell you anything. I'm trying to offer a solution." And I went on my little talk to tell him specifically what I was there. And then I hear this voice come from the back of the office, "Let the kid in." The gentleman let me in. He let me in, and I sold him payroll service on the spot. He's the first guy that I knocked on the door to. I didn't have any appointment. Years later, I went back, knocked on the door. The same receptionist was there. What do you think happened? She didn't let me in again. So I'm like, no, Marty knows me, and I want to talk to him. And it almost went through the same routine 3 years ago. Marty's like, "Oh, that's the kid from the payroll company. Let him in." I go back there with this business plan. This was it. This was my entire business plan. My dad and I put it together. Okay, it's a simple Excel spreadsheet, and I gave it to Marty, and I said, "This is what I plan on doing. This is the kind of capital we need." And I don't even think I got halfway through the conversation. He goes, "How much do you need?" And I'm like, "Oh boy, this can't really be happening this easily." And I told him the number, and he said, "Okay, let's do it." Now, that seems like absurd and ridiculous, but that happens, and I'll tell you the reason why that can happen to you the same exact way. Because I must have made an impression on him the few years prior that he believed in me for some reason, whatever that reason was. He was also an astute, smart business person. He was in the recurring revenue business, which means that every single month or every single week, he got paid by his clients and electronically would take it out of their bank account, even back then. So when he saw our business and said, "Oh, I'm in the alarm business, Basso wants to be in the payroll business," completely different, but it's a recurring revenue business. The multiples in recurring revenue business tend to be stronger than other businesses. He's like, well, okay, I think I want to be involved in this because it's a completely different industry. I understand the business model, and I can probably help this kid from stop making mistakes. And he did. The first 4 or 5 years, he helped dramatically in me stopping making stupid mistakes. So we basically signed the deal on the back of this exact car. I found it on the internet, but this is the exact one that he had in 1997 in the pouring rain. And I still have a copy of the contract. It's wet and crinkled, where I signed the deal that would change the course of my life. Fast forward, nearly 20 years and a lot that went on, and we ended up selling the entire group of businesses. I got asked to negotiate for nearly $100 million. So to say that his $75,000 investment did pretty darn well is an understatement, okay? So let's talk about partners a little bit. I mentioned that he was incredibly helpful and he was incredibly bright. That's true. He didn't even finish high school. He literally went around and did alarm systems for people's homes out of his VW van. He was a hustler. He was born in Brooklyn, worked his butt off to have this successful company, which, by the way, he just exited like 2 weeks ago to a very large number. So he found me, and I was the goose that laid the golden egg. What do you think probably happened 10 or 15 years into the relationship? Just take a guess. I'm doing all the work. He lent some money. What do you think might have happened? Yes, Michelle. He was collecting money and doing nothing for it. Do you agree with her that he did nothing for the money, even though it was 10 or 15 years prior that he lent the money to the company? Yes. He took the risk, right? I mean, you guys are at business school. That's correct. He took a significant risk at the time, and maybe it wasn't even a rounding error in his net worth, but he did take the risk. Still, it was an issue. I'll tell you why. Go ahead. Well, he definitely got a good ROI. I will tell you that. But what ended up happening was there was animosity because he wanted to do things later when he realized that there was just an enormous amount of money being made, and started stepping over my title and our relationship and the contract that we had set up. Unfortunately, eventually it ended badly. And part of the reason I'm telling you this story is it's impossible probably to know unless you see the signs at the very beginning that it's not going to be a good fit. At that time, it was a good fit, but it doesn't always mean it's forever. And when we wanted to start a new business, and this is what broke the straw that broke the camel's back, we were going to start a new business together, which he basically insisted on it. And I'm like, no, I don't want to do this with you. I want to do it on my own. And I said, well, what are you going to bring to the table this time? We had the capital the first time. You lent the business the money at a rate which you got paid back plus the profit. And he said, nothing. You're going to do all the work, and we're going to put up even money. I'm like, what? There's something wrong with that. And that was the end of our relationship because he meant it. At that point, he was just willing to abuse the situation and take advantage of the situation and think that I was still that 23-year-old kid when I was a grown adult that have built multi-million-dollar businesses. But I don't think poorly of him. And I think probably right after the breakup happened, I did think poorly of him. I'm like, why would he do this to me? We've done this together, over the years. And I've let that since go because that's not a healthy thing to do. And I've had other partners, incredibly successful runs with other partners. Some of the partners that I've dealt with, I owned an insurance agency. That insurance agency I had for 8 years because all the clients that I had at the payroll and human resources company could be payroll clients of the insurance agency. When I was ready to sell that business back to my partner, it was easy peasy. We came up with a number. There was a tiny bit of arguing. Within 3 days, we had the deal done. So let's fast forward a little bit to real estate. So the name of the talk is Basement to Boardroom because literally, if you see that up there in the corner, that's where my office was. I was literally in the basement in a storage room. That's where I started. And one of the good things my partner did is he stopped me from wanting to buy big fancy things when nobody ever came to our office. Nobody ever came to our office. We were outside people. In fact, I was probably wearing clothes that were more expensive than I could actually afford, so I kind of looked the part, and that's fine too. There's that old adage, you fake it till you make it. I wasn't really faking it, but I was definitely putting an image on that wasn't quite there yet. And that kind of was ongoing throughout my career. I remember when I first started doing any kind of public speaking, I thought I knew what people wanted, and then I would try to give them what they wanted, and it fell completely flat. Until I started just telling my story and being myself, and you hear about it all the time from guys like Gary Vaynerchuk and so forth, being authentic, it will be the key to your entire careers is to just be you. It doesn't mean you can't play a part within the organization, whether you're working for another company or building your own, but that culture that you build at the organization that you might start has to start with you. And you have to be true to yourself. Because if you're not, it bleeds through in everything you do. Every hire that you make, every organizational decision stems from, hopefully, some of the young CEOs that are sitting out here. And to me, I did not learn that probably till my early 30s. So I spent probably almost a decade of making mistakes like that. And it cost me good employees. It cost me relationships because I thought when I was the boss, well, you should just listen to me. I'm the boss. That's my name on the door right over there. But that was my young naivete, not realizing that that is just complete nonsense. And you as young entrepreneurs that are going to be coming out have to be even more cognizant of it because it's what people are all talking about now. It wasn't that big of a deal 25 years ago. It's like, it's amazing how things have changed dramatically to the benefit of the employee. But at the end of the day, it stems from you. It stems from you. You have to be the one that's leading the charge. So the real estate, when I moved out of that particular place, I moved to the one in the bottom left. And that was an industrial place. This is a kick because they literally had engines running like in one of the suites that was attached to it with forklifts that were gas. We routinely had to exit the building because there was carbon monoxide detectors going off because they were running it. But it was the cheapest place I could afford. And eventually that got a little old. And I turned out that the landlord was stealing electricity from me. He had all his wires piped into my box, and he was literally stealing the electricity. So, and we had to prove it. I had to spend thousands of dollars to get an electrician. So, buyer beware. And the thing about trust, has anybody heard of a guy named Stephen Covey or Stephen Covey Jr.? Does it ring a bell to any of you? There's a book I'm going to recommend. This gentleman over here did. Stephen Covey Jr. is the son of a guy named Stephen Covey. Stephen Covey Jr. wrote a book called The Speed of Trust. I highly recommend you read that after you read my book, The Everyday Entrepreneur. But if you read The Speed of Trust, it'll change the way that you think about how humans interact and how important that trust is with other individuals, how it makes business move faster, it makes your life move faster, it makes your relationship better with your wife, your kids, your neighbor, whoever it is, when there's trust. When there's lack of trust, things come to a screeching halt. And you'll find that along with negotiations and anything else you do in business, it's really important. So I literally moved 6 times. One time I was driving past one old country road, and I saw that a big bank was going out of business or selling. It was Long Island Savings Bank. And I knew I needed to move offices. So we made these unique deals. I went in with my partner at the time who had a bunch of mechanics because they put in alarms. And there is this sea of ugly purple cubicles. And I'm like, oh, I don't want to buy these things. They're horrible. They look awful. Like no one's going to want to use them. I bought 50 of them for $2 grand. And I used those cubicles for like 8 years. Now here's the best part. My unique situation for where I ended up renting was in the basement of a hotel. The reason I ended up in the basement of a hotel is because, number one, it was cheap, and the guy couldn't rent it for some reason, for parties, for some reason unknown to me. We put this big partition wall up, and my staff got to eat the continental breakfast in the morning when they came in. Unfortunately, I don't have pictures to share, but you need to figure out creative ways to use the real estate. Today, things are very different. Who works from home right now? Raise a hand. Who has a job and works from home full-time? Full-time. Again, small amount. How about part-time? Who works from home part-time? Okay. Are some of you being beckoned back to the office full-time yet? Yeah, okay. Yeah, that's so. All right, so real estate's not going away, and I think the work from home thing is going to continue. I know for me, I prefer to be in an office. I prefer to be in an environment, especially when you're a young professional. One of the pieces of advice that I can give is don't be so hurried to say, oh, I love working from home, it's this and that. There's that soft skills that you can't get sitting behind your computer or behind the Zoom. And you get them from peering over somebody else's cubicle, having your boss walk by. Everything that happens in an office or in a work facility, whether you're a contractor on the job or whether you're physically in an office building, happens much faster. Now, that might seem foreign to some of you folks that are used to the work from home or used to having the technology at your fingertips, but I was talking to a couple of the young professionals tonight, and that face-to-face does not go away. That face-to-face to me is what built my career and still continues to build my career. Not that you can't do business purely online. I'm not suggesting you can't. You could build great relationships, but until you've literally sat across from somebody, I think that you'll probably have less of an opportunity than you think. So my advice is your first job, work in the office or in the facility as much as you possibly can, even if you think it's going to be painful for a period of time. So I bought a new building in Freeport. I bought a building in Freeport, and I kept it for 10 years. And I ended up using a special program called the New York State Empire Zone. And what that did was it allowed me to purchase this about $1 million building, and then I got tax credits which flowed through me personally for bringing workers from outside of Freeport to the distressed area in Freeport. And we were there for 10 years. We did exactly what the program said. We brought 50 people that were previously not in Freeport, spending money in all the local businesses to revive North Main Street in Freeport. And not only did it pay for the building, it probably ended up making another $750,000. And the reason the state was so generous was because I put all that money back into the business to grow it. And I ended up having close to 100 employees working for that business, partly because of the great program that the state provided. Now, it doesn't exist anymore. They basically banished that particular program because there was too much graft. People were cheating. Surprise, surprise, they were cheating. It happens all the time. Now they have something called the Excelsior program, which is a fraction of what it used to be. But the moral of the story is use every advantage that you have in business. Don't think that the government is completely against you, whether you're on the Republican side or the Democratic side. It doesn't matter once you've started your business. You use all the programs that you have at your disposal. And I didn't even know about this. How did I learn about this? From a face-to-face meeting with an insurance broker that I barely knew. He said, oh, have you heard of them? I'm like, no. If I haven't met that guy, that never would have happened. That money I used to grow my business let me buy the bigger building that you see pictured in the middle. That was a $4 million building. That was 20,000 square feet. We gutted it and completely redid it, put a whole conference center, as you can see pictured here. This is over a period of 20 years. So literally from the basement to a crappy, carbon monoxide, facility, to a building that wasn't so great in Freeport but served us incredibly well, to a big, beautiful building that we could able to really afford and be proud of. But you can see that took, 20 years. That didn't happen, in an internet minute overnight. And I think that my son, who's just finishing up the University of Tampa, who's 21, going to be 22 in a few weeks, he wants everything like this, man. He thinks it's going to come, and I'm going to get a job, and I'm going to do this, and I'm going to have that corner office. And as his dad, who's lived through this, I was hoping he was paying a little closer attention to what actually took place. He is, but the truth of the matter is, you guys have a bigger challenge, I think, in some ways than I had when I was coming up. Because everything is instantaneous, and it's not your fault. You were used to it. This is how you were brought up. I wasn't brought up that way. Cell phones didn't even exist, until after I graduated college. So that's like mind-boggling to other people. My kids are like, yeah, they just like this, and I'm there with the thumbs, and I'm not even that bad at it, but these guys, they look at me like I'm a total neophyte with this. So the real estate is important because at the end of the day, whether you're work from home or whether you have a desire to get into commercial real estate. Who did I meet tonight that wants to get into commercial real estate? Was there somebody? Yes. So why do you want to get into commercial real estate? We're going to go a little off topic because I remember you were interested in real estate.
Yeah, I love the appreciation aspect of it. And consistent cash flows. I just think it's an overall a great investment.
Have you ever worked for a real estate company yet? I know you're only a sophomore, if I remember correctly, right?
Yep, yeah.
Okay.
I worked with my family.
Okay, so your family's in the real estate business some way, shape, or form. So why do you think it's a good investment overall? Okay, it's great, you get rent coming in, you got money, you're selling. What's the long-term goal of owning a bunch of commercial real estate?
So specifically, we do like J4 zone properties, so like medical offices. And personally, there's just always going to be a need for medical offices for medical professionals. So I always see it as a great investment. The medical industry only gets larger and more innovative. So definitely, I think it's a great investment.
Good answer. And for me and a lot of my successful friends, most of the really successful folks I know own real estate. And that's just not a coincidence. I mean, they're not making any more oceanfront in Miami Beach unless they do what some of the Middle East countries did, and they build an island off the shore. Where is that again? Where's the one they built the island? Does anybody know where it is? Dubai. Okay, maybe if they do that, it'll be worth it. It might work, but in general, I completely agree with you, and that's why I ended up being in the commercial business, and I own other properties now as well for rental. So I think it's a great place to start. So acquisitions, investments, exits, and cautionary tales. So after I built my first business, in 2012, I ended up purchasing another business. And I ended up doing a stock deal, not a cash deal. So what would be the benefit of me doing a stock deal and not a cash deal? All you smart business people out here. There you go. One good answer. I said, why would I want to have done a stock deal? Oh, you wanted to repeat what he said? Oh, okay. Could you say your answer again louder, sir? Right. So for me, part of the reason that I did it was I desperately wanted to buy this company. So and I didn't want to spend my cash. We had it, but what we ended up doing was giving them the two partners of another business, which was in the payroll and human resources business. We ended up giving them 20% of our much larger company in trade for all their clients and revenue. And what that did was it literally gave us almost a 75% growth rate that year and accelerated us. And the reason it was so important, because just a handful of years later, in our businesses, like many businesses, your multiple that you sell the business from is based on how large the business is. And it's not always the case, but definitely in my industry, the larger your business was, the more that someone was willing to pay as a multiple of either your EBITDA, and I'm not going to define what that is. All of you are, should probably know what that is by now, or a basis of your gross revenue. In my industry, the EBITDA wasn't really talked about, although it was important. It was gross revenue. So you got a gross revenue, and the industry standard was X. We ended up getting X plus because we built one of the largest privately held payroll companies in the entire country. People were fighting over it. ADP, who some of you might be familiar with, big public company, and Paychex, which is another big public company, were literally bidding back and forth. Now, there's a little nuance to this story. So I told you at the beginning, that I ended up buying a business, and I ended up using a piece of software. Now, that piece of software, I had the license from that original parent company. Well, in 2009, Paychex bought that license to the product that I was using. So my biggest competitor just bought the product that I use to run my entire business. It was literally like getting hit in the head with a brick. You're like, I'm going to be out of business. They're going to try to force me out. And they did. They tried to force me out of business. What they tried to do was lessen the ability of my product while continuing to make improvements in process in their core product. Eventually, it ended up in a lawsuit where myself and a few other folks licensing the software sued this big public company who had all the money in the world. At that point, they were a $2.6 billion company and could have spent us under the table for years. We didn't fold. And part of the reason we didn't fold is because we did our research and we hired good professionals. We hired a good attorney. We hired a good forensic accountant. And we found out that they were sued 6 years prior for almost the same exact transgression that they were about to do to me. And we put the fear of God in them, we think, because eventually they really came to the table, they dropped the suit, and I was asked to negotiate the deal to sell all the licenses back to them. So when I said I did roughly a $100 million deal, I wish that was all mine. It wasn't. There was 5 or 6 other business owners that asked me to negotiate that particular deal, and we ended up selling it back to Paychex in 2018. But what gave me my start and what made the multiple work was the fact that we had this acquisition. Without that acquisition, I probably would have made about $10 million less personally without having acquired that business in the stock deal that I did. Because I used the money that I didn't spend on actually purchasing the business on continuing to grow the business. Okay. So the exit. Not only did I exit the business in 2018, I had started another payroll company with a completely different software multiple years prior. And the licensor that licensed me the product was constantly giving me grief. Well, you're not allowed to do that. And I said, where is it in the contract that I can't do this? And the devil's always in the details. So as a young entrepreneur, as painful it is, really understand what you're signing, what you're getting into, what you're looking at. And I knew that contract, which was this thick, inside out and backwards. I probably read it 100 times. So they didn't have a leg to stand on, so they didn't have a choice but to let me run this separate business. So I ran this separate business, and then I continued to build that after I sold it in 2018. And then I had another bidding war in 2020 with VC companies and other organizations, including a public company called Assure Software. I ended up exiting that business in 2020, and it was another one of the best decisions I made in my life because I was able to monetize the previous 20 years and then that 4 years at probably the highest multiple that the industry has seen in the past decade. And all of this is because of the relationships that I built while I was building the business. I literally couldn't have done it without some of the people in this room. Myself and 20 other people started an organization called the Long Island Elite 20 years ago. It was a young professional networking group, and we also give money to charity. And those people, some of them are here tonight, we help raise millions for charity, but I know from that one group that I'm involved with, I personally made millions of dollars from. So, that face-to-face, that networking that you constantly hear about, it's real, and I think it's probably one of the most important things you can do tonight. So if you didn't get a chance to sit with some of the entrepreneurs that are here, make sure you meet them before you leave, because it'll make a difference in your career. I know I've already connected with a few folks that I want to get to know, as their careers move along. Cautionary tale. So this is a good one. I'm going to fast forward a little bit. So here's a check for $50,000. And I wrote this check, my original check, to a guy named Eric Aronson. And I don't care if he hears this. Maybe I'll send it to him. Turns out he was an ex-con, and he was conning me and a lot of other people. So I invested $50,000 in his business, and I was supposed to get interest payments. And interest payments never came. So I went back to him. I said, well, you missed your interest payment, so I'm calling the note, and you have to pay me back. So he gave me this check. I went to the bank, and I said, is there funds in the bank to get it? And they're like, no, there's like $14 in the bank. They didn't tell me how much, but there was not enough to cover $50,000. So I went back to him. I said, dude, there's no money not enough money. Oh, there was a clerical error, mistake. Okay, maybe benefit of the doubt, maybe the first time. Next day, went back with another check. Same thing, not enough money in the bank account. So I went to him, and this is a big man, and probably wasn't the smartest idea. I don't recommend this, by the way. But I basically said, listen, I have contacts in the media, and I went on for about good 10 or 15 minutes about how Newsday will show up at his doorstep, and the camera crew will be here, and this and that. He literally escorted me to the bank with a different checking account and wrote me my check for $50,000, which I wired to my account. So you can get burnt no matter how smart you are. You think there's a good deal out there to be had. I caution you, to really dig under the covers. This was a long time ago. I was also flush with cash. It didn't seem to mean that much to me at the time, but I made a mistake. I trusted someone who I shouldn't have trusted because I did not do my research. If you take the time to investigate the people you do business with and really know who they are and check them out, this kind of stuff won't happen to you. And it's not the only time it's happened to me either. So here's some of the investments that I've made over the past 20 years. If you look on the left side, you'll see all the investments that I'm no longer in that are either sold or completely failed. So the one up at the top, Customer Feedback Solutions, completely failed. Invested a ton of money into this business with a colleague of mine who I know, trusted, high-end professional. The business model just didn't work. And we tried to make it work, and no matter what we did, it just failed. And it was very frustrating because we thought we had all the pieces in play. We had plenty of cash. Within 18 months, we were done, and that was it. I probably lost a couple $100,000 on that deal. You'll see there's a couple Broadway shows. There's one called 13, okay? Broadway's awesome. I love Broadway shows. That happens to be a musical. I went to go to see the show. I invested in it when it opened. My friend Ken Davenport is the producer. It bombed miserably. The saving grace is you can now watch it on Netflix because Netflix bought the rights, and it's on Netflix right now. And I made $1.87. I literally just got a check. I got a $1.87 check. I'm like, it cost you more to process that check. I would have told you not to send it. So I lost 50 grand on the musical 13. And then there was Tina and Tony's wedding. That was the revival of that. That was a disaster too. I don't know what I was trying, but I was trying to get involved in these different things. And for me, Broadway's probably not on my hot list right now. But the one I think is important is Empire National Bank. So I don't know if you guys are familiar with this bank, but they're a Long Island bank, and they've got 6 locations. It was a brand new bank. Myself and 30 other investors raised $30 million to start a brand new bank. And we owned shares at about $10 a piece. And we were hoping that in 6 or 7 years, we'd sell it for $60, $70. And that also did not come to fruition the way that I liked. But a good bank, Flushing Bank, did buy it, and it ended up going for like $15 or $16. But I ended up having to hold that for a decade. When I did the math, I could have done much better with something else than holding that for a decade. I probably should have sold it off much sooner, but I did have some strong relationships with that bank. For me, it was a massive learning experience. And for new entrepreneurs, imagine just sitting around and figuring out how a bank starts or how a bank runs. I get it, basically, but I learned about the Office of Currency Control and all the mechanisms that actually make this national banking system work. And let me tell you, it's a mess. It's a friggin' mess. I'm surprised anything works at all based on the process of actually starting a brand new bank. But it was one of the better experiences in my life, even though financially it might not have turned out like I liked. So the stuff on the right-hand side are the things that I'm involved in right now. So right now I have about 5 or 6 different things that I'm invested in. One is myself. I do executive coaching and I do consulting. Another one is Bookkeeper 360. Bookkeeper 360 is a company that I used as an outsourced company to do all my bookkeeping for my companies in the last few years. I believe strongly enough in them. We just raised $3.5 million, and we've got some big private equity firms looking at us now to give us $40 or $50 million. So my $100,000 investment hopefully can turn into $5 or $6 million 4 or 5 years from now. So you have to have the foresight to really understand the industry. And I think the mistakes that I made when I was young that I hope you don't make, is that just because you might have done well and had a couple of bucks, I think the mistakes that I made is because I didn't stay in my lane. And I don't mean that's because I wasn't creative and took some chances. You're supposed to take some chances. But I went way off the map on stuff that I did not understand. And for me, those are the ones that bomb. The ones that I really, truly understood are the ones that tend to go much better. So for me, that was a big finding. A couple of the ones here, eGifter, it's a gift card company. Mango Tree is a real estate investment company. And my friend owns a company called Hard Hats. He's here tonight. They help workers, they connect workers in the construction field with construction companies. That's going to take off big. We're super excited about Hard Hats because it's a very low cost of acquisition for users of the platform and for the contractors that might want to use it. So we're excited about the future of Hard Hats. Lastly, or almost lastly, your personal brand. So who here has an Instagram account? Okay, how about TikTok? Oh, there's a few hands went down. It's an age group. Oh, of course Michelle does. Okay, how often are you guys on your Instagram and TikTok? An hour a day, 2 hours a day, 3 hours a day? A lot probably, right? I'm probably on it more than I should be too. But you need to start worrying about your personal brand now if some of you are freshmen. So the stuff that you put out there, I know my daughter's almost 20 and she's at the University of Miami, and like I look at the stuff and I'm like, oh, I gotta go like this. I can't look at the stuff that she and her friends post. So you need to consciously think about that, what you want your image to be in the world. And I'm not suggesting don't be young. I'm suggesting that you really have to curate who you're going to be and what the world is going to see. And you want them to see you? Great. You want them to see you doing stupid shit that'll get you in trouble or, that will stop you from getting a job or making? Probably not. So if you're not conscious about it now, it's probably something you should seriously consider. And I'm not being parental here. It's purely about your income. It's about you making the living that you want to make. Your parents have probably told you enough about it. That's not the angle I'm taking. I'm saying it could hurt your career if you put crappy stuff out there like that. So I spent many years doing media. And I've probably been on Fox or CNBC. My publicist in the back, Bill Corbett, has gotten me on all those networks. And what it's done is it's taken me, just a regular, South Jersey kid who ended up going to Hofstra and, making a career, someone that people listen to. And it still boggles my mind, but there's no reason that any of you in this room can't do that. You just have to put yourself out there and be willing to have people say, oh, I don't like that guy. I remember I was in Vegas probably about 6 or 7 years ago. I'm playing blackjack. I don't gamble, but my friend was sitting next to me playing blackjack, and some guy started yelling at me because he didn't like, I didn't even know who he was, and because I said something that he didn't like, and I'm like, I have no idea who this crazy person is, but I literally got yelled at. I would get threats on the telephone. People, when they didn't like what I had to say about the then president or whatever it was, people would call up and just leave nasty stuff on my voicemail. I would get 6 voicemails the next day. You have to have a thick skin when you decide to do media, but it is very powerful. Has anybody done any television work? Any of the students or any of the folks in here done? What have you done? Oh, cool. Okay, so interviews. Are you a model? Okay, you're a model. And what kind of modeling do you want to do? Okay, so she's a freelance model, so your image is everything. And it is you. It is physically how you look, how you present yourself, everything. And you wouldn't put any stupid crap out there because it could affect your career, right? You just know better. So she's curating her career and the modeling, which happens to be very particular. It is how you look, clearly, but it doesn't have to be. And I mentioned Vaynerchuk earlier. He purposely, I think he doesn't shower or shave, or he just gets out on the stage and he just does whatever he wants to do. But that's who he is, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. You're supposed to be you. And all of the things, all the awards, all the CEO awards, all those things come, but they also they don't necessarily come just because you're that good. I remember when I started getting some of these awards at the very beginning. I got the Young Alumni of the Year award from Hofstra when I graduated. And it turns out a friend of a friend nominated me, and okay, I got that award. I probably earned it, but there was a friend of a friend who put my name in the hat. And then this corporate culture award, my publicist wrote really good stuff. And I got in front of it. So, the problem that I had young in my career is I believed my own press. But it took me a long time to be like, okay, most of this is true, most of it, but you shade it this way or that way. Don't believe your own shit. because at the end of the day, you need to stay humble and you need to understand where you came from. And I don't care if you were from a divorced family, if you were poor, if you were rich. It's irrelevant. The world doesn't care about your sob story. They don't care where you came from. They care about what can you do for me now and who are you to me now. And that's what I finally figured out. And I just decided to be who I am. And you like me or you don't like me. But your personal brand is going to drive who you are and how successful you can be. Because even if you're not in front of a camera, even if you're not on a stage, you have to curate your personal brand. On LinkedIn, does every student in here have a LinkedIn profile? Okay, good. Keep building it out. Put stuff on there that you don't think might necessarily be relevant. Make sure your hobbies, your interests, the things that you do, your pictures of you that are relevant to your career, they have to be out there. It's not Facebook, pictures of your pet chipmunk or whatever you got. You're not going to do that. But you have to make sure you curate everything. And lastly, there are some trappings of success. So I bought my first jet right before I sold my last business, and some of my friends who are here have had the opportunity to come on trips with us. So being an entrepreneur was probably the most fulfilling thing other than my marriage and my children, that it was incredibly unexpected. And I thought that there was no way this could possibly be me. And I remember when I went to go buy that plane, the gentleman said, "Oh, where do you fly private now?" I'm like, "I've never been on a private plane. What are you talking about?" And he goes, "Well, you're gonna buy one. You never actually." I said, "Who would hate it? How could this suck? How could it possibly suck? It's like Entourage. You pull your car up, they take your shit out of the car, and you get in the plane and you go wherever you want to go. And they don't go anywhere. They're your pilots. There's no late. There's no early. You're just there." So I ended up doing it. And the reason I put this picture up, and it's not on any of my social media or anything, and it's this small group here, is because the things that you want in this life do come with money, okay? And you're all here to be successful, and it's not just about the money. But if I had my choice to be happy with money or happy without money, I'd probably take happy with money. And that might sound awful, and you might say, "Oh, well, no," but it's true. I remember when I first started, my first car was a 1979 Chevy Chevette that me and my brothers literally had the engine on a table, and I prayed every time I turned that key that it would start. I don't really have to worry about that anymore. It's the little things, but once you get to a certain level, the rest of it doesn't matter. It is all gravy. I've since sold that plane. And my friends are like, "Oh, shit, you sold the plane? That sucks." I'm like, "Yeah, of course it sucks for you." But the truth of the matter is I went through all the trappings of all of those things. I had every car under the sun. My wife is here, Mary Beth, and I was literally trying to list all the cars I had. I've had like 43 cars in the past 20 years. Who has 43 cars in the past 20 years? I couldn't even remember some of them. I literally bought a brand new 2022 Bentley, had it in the garage for 11 months. I didn't tell my wife the car's gone. There's a brand new Porsche in there. She walks right past it. She had no idea that I even bought a new car. My daughter's like, "Daddy, isn't that a new car?" Mommy's like, "Oh, you got another new car." And the reason I tell you this is, it matters, but it only matters this much. At the end of the day, you have to be happy with yourself. You have to be happy with the community that you built, and you have to be happy with your lives. Being successful doesn't necessarily equate being wealthy, and you might have heard that before, but you guys are all here to make a good living for yourself, and whether you end up being an entrepreneur or working for another organization or working for a family business, you have the ability, and don't let anybody tell you you don't. Because people told me no constantly. "Why are you doing this? Why are you launching this business? Why are you trying that? How could you possibly do this?" I had so many haters at one point, and you have to realize that's because most of the time they're envious of the situation that you're in. And it really pissed me off when I was younger, because why are these people, somebody's saying stuff about me, they don't even know who I am. They literally don't know me, but they talk shit about me. And I'm sure you've all had that in your life too. Don't worry about it. You got to find a way to let it go. And again, I didn't learn until probably till my late 30s to really let that stuff go. But it changes your life when you realize how important you are to yourself. And the external world is a lot less important than you think, even though it's the world that we live in. I appreciate the time that you guys spent with me tonight. We didn't get to as many questions as I would like to with the group, but we have some time left for you guys to ask some questions. If you'd like anything in the entrepreneurial realm, anything that we talked about, and don't be shy. Yes.
So you talked a lot about the businesses that you were a part of, that have come and gone. Was there ever a business that came your way social ramifications?
Okay, not negative social ramifications, but I can twist it a little bit to answer your question. So I was asked to be the CEO of a company called BookMD, and it's in the medical field. And my friend Bert, who was manning the roundtable, also was in the medical field in the medical billing company. So I asked him about the concept. It was going to be a direct competitor of ZocDoc. Okay, the platform had already been built. I needed to invest a little bit, and then I would run the company. And it was literally at the 11th hour, and I decided not to do it. And I decided not to do it because of one conversation I had with the then founder of the business. And it was about how we were going to structure something and who would be in charge. He says, Rob, you're the CEO, make all the decisions. So I didn't know I was testing him at the time, but I said, okay, this is the first hire we need to make. And the first thing he said is, no, we can't hire them. You've got to pay half as much. So he didn't want to, there's no way I could do, after doing what I've done my whole life, have somebody that says you're going to be in total control, and then the first decision that I make, no, you can't make that decision. So now you might say, Rob, that's a little harsh. No, I know people, and generally those types of things don't change, so it was my decision to just pass on the whole thing. I hope they're hugely successful, but not with me. Yes, go ahead.
You said that you had a partnership that went bad after 15 years.
Yeah.
Right? If you could go back in time, was all the other partner
No.
in your contract, what would you have done?
No, it was me too. It was me too. I was a bit of an egomaniac, so no laughing. No, it's true. So I was difficult. I was definitely difficult because I was ridiculously hard driving. I was very hard on myself when things didn't go well, and then I wasn't getting the support from him. I was to blame as well. It sounded one-sided, but it is a good question. What I would have done differently is my young self wouldn't have taken the deal that I made. I would have taken a different deal. I would have pressed for a different deal and not set the parameters up where he got the spoils of my work in such an enormous way. So I made that mistake, but I didn't get the guidance. And I was not a business school student. So I didn't have some of the answers. So I would go back in time and change that original deal, and it probably would have ended just fine. Hope that answers your question. So, yeah.
Yeah, so you talked about times where you experienced people hating, people, casting doubt on you. Was there ever a time that you experienced self-doubt? And if so, how did you deal with that?
5 minutes before I got on the stage. And I do all the time. I think it's the human condition. I doubt myself all the time. It's funny because a couple of my friends like, oh, you seem so confident, you get up there. No, I'm nervous. I'm nervous and I doubt my abilities all of the time. But what I've gotten better at is hiding that to the general public. And I've also gotten better at really feeling comfortable. Like April, we were supposed to do this event. I got COVID. It was supposed to be an interview session, okay? Someone was supposed to interview me, all right? And I was going to sit there and answer questions. There's no question that you could possibly throw at me in any business realm that I wouldn't formulate an answer to right on the spot. That's what I'm really good at, is coming up with stuff right on the spot. I wasn't even remotely nervous about that. Out of all the public speaking I've done, I still get nervous and I still doubt myself, even though I know exactly what I'm going to say and how I'm going to do it, and I'm prepared. Unfortunately for me, it's also what drives me, to take that extra time to make sure that I'm prepared, to make sure I know who my audience is and what I'm talking about. I've doubted my ability negotiating that big deal, sitting across the table from the CEO of a $3 billion company looking at me like, who's this freaking, it was like, I couldn't even believe I was in the room. So yeah, I doubted myself, but you pull your pants up and you do the best you can to put on the good face and make sure that you don't make the decisions that can disrupt the rest of your life. And I've made horrible decisions. I've made decisions because I've doubted myself not to do things, and I've made decisions to do things that I shouldn't have done because of doubt. I don't think anybody's going to escape that in their daily lives. It's just you need to get better at it. I think I'm better at it now. It's probably because I'm a little more comfortable than I was. Doesn't mean I don't have the same drive and determination. I do, but I'm going to do it. The next act, which I'm working on now, is going to be smarter, faster, and more effective than the last three things that I did. Yes?
Do you think college degree is important? Because you are doing business during your yes. You better say yes.
That is it. All right, after all the tuition being spent here, you have to get a college degree. Okay, I will answer the question. The question was, do you think a college degree is important? And I will say, I think it is. And different than a lot of folks that you hear on the internet, you don't need, just look it up on YouTube, just go to these things. And what college did for me, I'll answer it that way, was it gave me a framework of getting up, having something to do, being responsible on a daily basis, getting my work done, having an assignment at a much higher level than high school was or your junior levels. So at very worst, it gave you the stability and the understanding is you have certain responsibilities as a young adult, soon to be an adult, that are going to be very similar, if not even much tougher, when you get out in the work world after you leave college. So what it did for me is it gave me a framework of hard work. Hey, you could coast through college. I was an average student. Maybe I graduated with like a B- or something like that. And by the way, most of my friends who are super, super successful did not do well in college either. And because the grade, listen, your grades, your parents might, now the administration might hate me. The parents think the grades are really important because they might be helping you pay for this. For those of you that are paying for school yourself, I bet you're thinking about how well you're going to do. And I'm sure there's some of you in the room here. For me, I was fortunate enough, my dad did pay for my college, but as you saw, I worked all through college to make sure I had money because I didn't get money on a monthly basis to actually live and go out and go get 25-cent wings and $5 pitchers. I don't think they have that anymore, but nevertheless. Questions?
How did you stay motivated in times when things weren't really going your way or when business deals weren't really up to par? For me, I've just had this inner engine and I don't quit. And I think what really, for me, is having intention in the things that I do. And if I had a particular goal or something that I wanted to accomplish, unfortunately, sometimes I steamrolled over people and things to get what I wanted out of a situation, and I've learned a lot better tact now. But that comes from your internal motivation, and being internally motivated can be learned. You don't have to necessarily be born. People think that you have to be born that way. I think a lot of my stuff was circumstantial because I think my mom was busy out working when I was young and I had to fend for myself. And if I wanted a new bike or this and that, I had to go earn the money and make it. So it really depends on your upbringing. But for me to get past the hard stuff, I just ground it out, and I had a lot of consult. I spoke to other professionals that were smarter, older, wiser than I was. And I would ask them, what do I do here? What am I supposed to do? Sometimes I got crappy answers. Sometimes I got great answers, like buying the building. Somebody told me that information, and it literally made me millions of dollars by having a conversation on something I didn't know. So I am free to ask. I ask everybody. And my friend Michelle, she's a nutritionist who was at the table. I love her social media stuff. So I'm constantly asking her, did I post that? How did I get 4,000 hits? I never get that many. And she's like, well, Rob, because you did this and you hashtag. So you have a community of people that you trust and you know. That's what gets you through the hard times. Yes? Mostly people believing in you and the service and product that you have. And that to me, that was probably the hardest part is, getting the community at large to trust you. I was in people's bank accounts. At one point, we had $1 billion flowing through our bank accounts, taking money out, direct depositing a lot. So I had this huge responsibility. And, what I would tell myself was I wasn't just printing checks or this manual, which was really, at the end of it, the business was not that complicated, but I saw my company as the conduit in which wealth flowed through. So in other words, all the money that people got paid came through me, and they could use that money to go spend in the marketplace. So I looked at my business as a much higher level thing than it actually was. At a glorified level, we were clerks. We were clerks that ran numbers and printed checks. But we provided, a very high-level service that people needed. And at the beginning, people didn't believe that maybe they didn't believe in me. Maybe they didn't believe in the product. They didn't believe that they needed it as well. Oh, there's these big, public companies. What do we need this little company over here? What are you going to do better? What are you going to do different? And, failure, it was daily at my offices. I mean, I remember when 9/11 took place, we ended up driving the packages to the end of the Brooklyn Bridge so people could get paid because people were walking across the bridges. And it sounds crazy, but we did our part during that whole weirdness that went on. And I think even after that,
that kind of became who we were in the marketplace, willing to practically do anything for our clients. And that kind of catapulted us really after that time and a few years after that. And then there was a recession in 2008 when people were looking for less expensive options. We were slightly less expensive, although that was not our unique ability. I don't have enough time to tell you everything. We ended up gaining huge market share when the economy was doing poorly. So I hope that kind of answers your question.
So it's safe to say you have pretty good control over where you spend your time now, based on your presentation. Why did you choose to come here?
That's an interesting question. For me, and I mentioned a group that I belong to, that I founded with some friends called the Long Island Elite. And that entire organization was built on the concept of networking and kind of paying it forward. At that time, we didn't have anything to give anybody, so we were giving it to each other, and we were trying to help each other. We probably didn't know what we were doing very well at that time. But for me, now that I have the time on my hands and the inclination, I did say I was going to be an educator. So in my mind, part of the reason that I do this is in hopes that after this hour conversation, that you at least leave here with a few more things that you can put, your hour in your quiver to make you not make the same mistakes, or take the same type of fuel or energy that I have to put it to the things that you do. So, plus I enjoy doing it. I get the most satisfaction out of, listening to what young up-and-coming professionals have to say. And to be quite frank, I know some of my colleagues that are in the room, you might make deals with some of the people in the room. You never know. Maybe you'll pitch me the next best idea and we'll be partners. So it's not a bad place for me to be, no matter how it pans. And if nothing comes of this, and I never see you guys ever again, I still hope you got something out of it. Yes?
I'd like to know, because you talked about this 20-year window when you were building, all these things were happening. Based on the age of your kids, that's also when you were married, starting a family. How did you balance the drive and motivation you had as an entrepreneur?
Ask my wife.
I was going to ask your wife the question, but how do you do it all? I mean, really.
I didn't do some of that very well. It was hard. It was hard. My wife was very supportive. Mary Beth was very supportive, but I was out a lot. I was out 5 nights a week for years, and it did take a toll, because I think in my mind, I like the question. Thank you, though. In my mind, my job was the provider. I was going to be the provider. She could have been on her own. She's got her master's. She's a teacher. She's very successful in her own right, and didn't need me for money. But we were building this life together, and there was a lot of imbalances that took place where she's like, "You're going out again?" But not in a negative way. It's just like, she'd like me home. But the one thing that I did do really well, that I think I did really well, was I never missed my kids' stuff. And that's the benefit about being self-employed, where I would go to their soccer or their football game, and it'd be 3 or 4 in the afternoon on a school day. I'd be the only dad or one other dad there, and I'd be there with all the soccer moms. And it was great. And I don't know that my kids appreciate that, but I think they will when they get older. They'll remember, occasionally did I have to take the phone call and walk away from the field, and my daughter was always looking at me. She's like, "I saw you on the phone." I'm like, "Skylar, it was 37 seconds I was on the phone." She because that's exactly what she does. She's constantly looking to see if I was watching. So I did it poorly for a number of years, but got better at it.
So the type of people you hang out with do impact the level of motivation you have and the type of person you are. So my question is, how does an average student like me at university network and connect with a successful person that would be willing to take the time out of their day to speak to you and mentor you?
I think that is a wonderful question. I'm going to repeat it. She said, how would a young professional get to meet someone that would take the time out of their day? Well, you took one big step by being here. So now you have me to potentially talk to, but there's 4 or 5 others that I guarantee that are in this room that if you introduce yourself to Michelle or Mark or Jeff or a couple other my colleagues, Jonathan, anybody here would help you. But in general, you got LinkedIn. Don't be shy. You'd be surprised if you put a thoughtful message together and say, "Hey, I'm a Stony Brook student. This is what I'm studying. I'm currently a model, and I see your profile. I'd really like to talk to you about the industry." I'm telling you, most people will respond to you. You'd be surprised. I still do that to this day. My profile is pretty decent. People look and go, "Oh, maybe I want to talk to this guy." But most people will take the time. Try it. I have a deal. So why don't you, let's figure this out together. So I'm going to hold you accountable to this now. Now I'm giving you a project. So in the next week, I want you to reach out to at least 3 or 4 people, at minimum of 3, that you think you want to communicate with a nice message. I will help you craft that message to communicate with them, and we'll see what our results are. Okay? Deal? Okay. Next. Yes?
How do you work what you like to do versus delegate?
Ha, that's a good question. There were some things I really sucked at. Like, I mean, some of the real heavy financial matters, like for example, I know how to read a balance sheet, I know how to read basic financials, but I am not a financial guru. I'm a people person. So I gravitated towards the things that were my skills. Anything else that I was not good at, I did not waste my time doing it, and I concentrated 98% of my effort on the things that I felt were my home run and that no one was going to beat me in those categories, and everything else I hired for. Nearly everything else. At the beginning, I had to do everything. That's how I understood how the whole business worked, and that means when I hired a controller, they couldn't get one over on me. I understood it very well, but it's a great question because there's this old, argument, oh, you're really horrible at this or you're not very good at that. You should work really hard and get better at that. I don't know. Why? Maybe there's some things that make sense for you to get slightly better at. But if you were, I'm just picking on you because you're sitting here. If you were the best runway model and you had the best walk out of anybody and you knew it, would you be worried about 4 or 5 other things? No, you'd be worried about how well you walk down the runway, and you'd spend all your time on that. Maybe that was a horrible example, but you guys get my point. So who here spends more time on the things they're good at and puts effort into getting better? Or the opposite, that actually spends time on the stuff that they suck at to try to get better. Someone want to give themselves up right now who spends time on getting better at things they really suck at? Yep. Okay. What is it that you're not very good at that you keep trying to get better at? And don't say tennis or squash or badminton.
Sharing feelings, like having a difficult conversation with somebody.
Okay. Yeah. That's something you probably should take a little bit of time to get better at. I agree. And that's why I said there's no absolutes, by the way. And on that note, I was horrible at that because everything is on my face, and it's just like, it was bad for a lot of years because I couldn't hide it. But eventually I just got better, and then I got an HR manager. But, so. Anybody else? Yes, sir.
So communication is one of the things I'm trying to work on right now.
Mm-hmm.
That kind of leads to my question as well, if I may. So from your talk, I noticed that communication was a big part of your success.
Mm-hmm.
How do you, let's say, walk into a conference or whatever, get people to kind of respect you and know that, oh, this guy is serious, he knows something, something like that?
You mean the minute you walk in the door and nobody knows who you are and you're a room of 100 people?
Like 2 minutes, maybe like,
I'm sorry, say that again?
give you like 2 minutes, sit down at a table, first few sentences.
For me, I'll tell you what I gravitate towards, and maybe I'll answer it that way. I gravitate to someone who immediately has a presence that you can't put your finger on. It's the way they sit, it's the way they walk, it's the way they carry themselves when they walk in a room. If I kind of walked up on the stage, kind of like this, looking down, you would immediately think something, but that's not what happened. I walked up the stage and I looked at everybody in the room. I engaged at least 15 people while I was walking around. Now, you might say that that's practice. Some of it is, but some of it is also just who you are. So to be an engaging individual, you need to get the other person talking about them. And one of the easiest tips is to ask them questions that are not one-word answers. So if you're uncomfortable sitting at a table, you can ask all kinds of questions and not, what do you do? Where are you from? Okay, I'm in real estate. I live in Dix Hills. Okay, those aren't very interesting questions. You can make them significant questions. Oh, you're here tonight. Who are you hoping to meet tonight? Oh, I'm hoping to meet blah, blah, blah because I do this for a living, and you get them talking for 5 minutes. And when you show interest in somebody else, they're gonna then show interest back in you. It's pretty simple human behavior. Good question, though.
When did you decide to quit your day job or your side job and just go all in on something?
Well, I touched on it a little bit, but again, we only had a limited amount of time. So when I left my job working for that first, I've only had one professional job out of college, and it was with that first payroll company. And when I was underpaid and underappreciated, like after a few months of kind of haggling, going back and forth, and knowing that my peers that were just older than me in age but doing worse were getting paid better and getting better assignments, I'm like, I'm out of here. So it was being treated poorly. is what finally made the decision that I'm not going to let somebody else dictate my future, no matter how good of the company is. And there are plenty of good employers out there that you can make careers. I'm sure some of the folks here work at big companies or work at modest-sized companies that they're not the boss and they get treated well. I still don't think, if I ended up with a company that treated me well, I still think I would have been out on my own, because I like to be in charge.
When you went on that idea, how much time are you spending every week on it?
I never stopped. It was 24. And I know that sounds crazy, but I was obsessive about it. And my wife will tell you I was absolutely obsessive about it. I did not stop thinking about it, working on it. That first few months, and you're going to be like, really? That's not possible. But I probably made over 1,000 phone calls a week, and I also knocked on 60 or 70 doors every single day. Now, the way you get business now is different, but people still knock on doors. You still see salespeople going in and out of businesses. I've literally probably made 100,000 telephone calls in my career, and I've personally sold 3,000 or 4,000 businesses, sat across from another human being 3,000 or 4,000 times. And, I think about it when I go to bed. I think about it when I wake up. It was obsessive, but I think that's the reason why the business was what it was. And it was incredibly hard to turn it off. When I sold my last business, you didn't ask this question, but I'm going to tell you, the 3 months afterwards were hard. I was depressed. It was awful. And even though I was prepared, I was not prepared for the mental anguish of having all of those people that I'd worked with for all those years just disappear at the blink of an eye like that. It was really, really hard. It probably took me a full year to get comfortable with it. Did you have a follow-up question? Of course you do.
When do you know when to stop? When you started this, you probably thought of all the benefits that you get from being successful.
Yeah.
But what is like the exit point? Like at what point are you successful enough?
Look, you used the word exit. I thought about selling the business the day I signed that contract with Marty on the back of his truck, back of his car, literally. And in fact, I'm coming out with a new training, which is going to be online later this year. It's Boardroom to Basement, and it's how to plan your exit from day one. So literally, I thought about what was going to be. I didn't have a time frame specifically at that point, but I knew at some point I was building this business to eventually monetize. Did I think it was going to take that long? Probably. I mean, I could have sold it 10 years prior. I had offers all the time, but it wasn't enough to retire on. It wasn't enough to say I'm completely financially independent. I had to start something else. I'm in a position now where I decided to do it because I don't have to do anything else unless I want to. Does that answer your question?
Did you set that point beforehand? Like, did you know when?
No, because and the reason I didn't, and some entrepreneurs might, I didn't, because you never know what you're going to get involved in. You never know what your life is going to bring at that time. I could have had another kid. One of my kids could have been sick. My sister-in-law has a child with special needs. Anything could change the course of that, and you have to be flexible and willing to change. So it's not a bad thing to put these date-driven things in there for, okay, I'm going to start this business and I'm going to exit in 7 years. But what if the market is bad? What if I have a friend that had a $275 million company, got an offer from a huge company to buy it for $250 million. Now I'm worth $1 billion. Now that offer's gone, and now maybe he'd only get $100 million because he didn't time it right. So if he had stuck to his guns and said, I want to be out in this many years, he would have left money on the table. So. Thank you very much, everybody. Appreciate you all coming.